Okay, great to see you all this afternoon. You are grantees of the Folklife Network program. It is the 3rd of October, and we are here today to talk a little bit about what we're calling our ARGOS program, that stands for Arts Relief General Operating Support. My name is Chad Buterbaugh. I'm the Senior Program Director with the Maryland State Arts Council, and we've had a number of transitions in the Folklife Network recently on organizational teams. So it's actually great to meet some of you on this call, as well as see some others of you for one of the first times. We are on Zoom today, obviously. Probably most of you are very familiar with this platform, but if you are not, your audio and video tools are at the left-hand side of the dashboard, and your chat function is right in the middle of the dashboard. You may also raise your hand and use any number of emojis using a bank of tools toward the right of the dashboard, and end the meeting at the far right of the dashboard, but hopefully you won't need to do that within the next hour. We begin each of our public-facing meetings with a series of grounding documents to get us all in the right mind space to be working with one another in alignment with best practices for accessibility. I'm going to read these out loud. The first of which is our land acknowledgement statement. Developed in consultation with tribal leaders from across Maryland over the past approximately year and a half. We acknowledge the lands and waters now known as Maryland are the home of its first peoples, the Akahannock Indian Tribe, Assateague Peoples Tribe, Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, Chopticot Band of Indians, Lenape Tribe, Nanticoke Tribe, Nasu-Wawash Band of Indians, Piscataway Conoy Tribe, Piscataway Indian Nation, Pocomoke Indian Nation, Susquehannock Indians, Youghiogheny River Band of Shawnee, and tribes in the Chesapeake watershed who have seemingly vanished since the coming of colonialism. We acknowledge that this land is now home to other tribal peoples living here in diaspora. We acknowledge the forced removal of many from the lands and waterways that nurtured them as kin. We acknowledge the degradation that continues to be wrought on the land and waters in pursuit of resources. We acknowledge the right of the land and waterways to heal so that they can continue to provide food and medicine for all. We acknowledge that it is our collective obligation to pursue policies and practices that respect the land and waters so that our reciprocal relationship with them can be fully restored. You can learn more about this land acknowledgement statement at msac.org under the resources section. You can also learn more about developing region-specific land acknowledgement statements for use in your own programming. MSAC's Equity and Justice Statements. The arts celebrate our state's diversity, connect our shared humanity, and transform individuals and communities. MSAC and its supporting collaborators are committed to advancing and modeling equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion in all aspects of our organizations and across communities of our state. MSAC and its grantees are committed to embracing equity and non-discrimination, regardless of race, religious creed, color, age, gender expression, sexual orientation, class, language, and/or ability. Our vision is to play an essential role ensuring that every person has access to the transformative power of the arts, and our mission is to advance the arts in our state by providing leadership that champions creative expression, diverse programming, equitable access, lifelong learning, and the arts as a celebrated contributor to the quality of life for all the people of Maryland. In 2019, we adopted a strategic plan comprising these 5 main goals. I'll read the bolded portions of these goals now and tell you how to read more about them if you so desire. Goal 1, increase participation. 2, provide intentional support. 3, build capacity. 4, leverage connections. 5, bolster Maryland arts. There's plain type here that you can also review right now, or read the entire strategic plan, which is published at our website. Once again, msac.org. When we are in creative meetings, as we are today, we ask folks to observe these creative meeting actions or rules of engagement. First of all, to celebrate being in the space with other creative people, to engage with everyone's presence as a gift, to acknowledge that together we know a lot, to enter the conversation with curiosity and inquiry, to share your idea and trust that it will be heard, to use I statements, focus your language on the task at hand, hold one another accountable with care, to apply the yes and strategy. In other words, I hear your idea and I'm going to add to it. And finally, to balance your speaking and listening. MSAC offers a regular series of mostly virtual and some in-person professional development. You can follow our Eventbrite page for updates about when the next sessions will be. They are all free. We offer topic-specific sessions benefiting mainly the nonprofit sector, as well as meet and greets, conversations benefiting grantees of particular programs, regional art summits. This fall, actually, regional office hours. We will be coming to your areas to host office hours and take questions starting tomorrow, in fact, in Howard County. And finally, the Maryland Arts Summit, which is a June convening for the arts and culture sector to come together, share ideas, share success stories, challenges, and have fellowship together. If you know of a topic that you don't see listed here, but you wish it were listed, please email us at our general address, msac.commerce@maryland.gov. If you're not already signed up for our mailing list, you can do so via this link. Again, this session is being recorded, so you'll be able to access this material later if you need. One of the absolute best ways to understand the work of MSAC from the back end is to join us as a panelist. Some folks on this call have already done this. I would encourage anyone, especially folks in leadership positions or executive positions, to consider panelist service if you have the time. Every time we have a grant program open at MSAC, we release a public call for panelists. Interested folks are invited to apply in Smart Simple, which is also our grants management platform. And those who are selected receive training and support from our staff. The panelist role includes review and scoring of applications in connection with a provided rubric, as well as required attendance at any public panel meetings. This is paid work. It's not paid an awful lot, but it is a reasonably good wage for the amount of work that folks typically put in. The costs, the wages, so to speak, generally goes between $300 and maybe $500 or $600, depending on the particular program in which the panelist is working. So do consider this opportunity. And you can actually see open calls by going to our website, msac.org, and visiting the Ways to Get Involved section. Okay, so this is what we're up to today. We are going through the following agenda regarding the ARGOS program. We've already gone through grounding slides, and we're going to take a little bit of time to give you an overview of the ARGOS program next. After that, we will give you an overview of the application process, reserve some time for questions and answers, and then reflect on the session before closing for the day. The Folklife Network is a relatively small grant program in terms of the number of grantees, however, so I would invite anyone with a question not to necessarily wait for question and answer, but to raise a hand or type a question whenever it might come up. So the Maryland State Arts Council this year has the great good fortune of being the recipient of $40 million in arts relief funding, in addition to our regular budget. We were excited when we got that news earlier this year and have spent the intervening time creating programs to get that money out the door. Approximately $36.4 million of this additional funding is being reserved for what we're calling the Arts Relief General Operating Support, or ARGOS. The ARGOS program, in keeping with the statutory language attached to this funding, is available to current grantees of the programs listed here. So A&E District Operating Support, County Arts Development, Creativity Grants for General Operating Support, you all in the Folklife Network, and the Grants for Organizations program. ARGOS funding will be dispersed in 2 rounds during the current fiscal year. Round 1, which we're getting ready for right now, will take place in fall 22, and there will be a second round in spring of 2023. I would encourage you not to think too much about round 2 right now, because we'll be releasing additional news and instructions on that process in a few months. So our attention for the time being is on round 1. Once again, this is an information session reserved for grantees of the Folklife Network. Those 8 grantees are listed here. Looking over the registrations for this session, I saw a number of names I didn't recognize. You all are very, very welcome to stay in the session if you're here. If you just want to learn more about the ARGOS program or learn more about the Folklife Network, but unless you are a team member, an employee, or associated with one of these organizations, you will not be eligible to apply for these funds. There are lots of other opportunities, though, for you at the Arts Council, provided you are a Maryland resident or organization. So what is the purpose of the ARGOS program? Well, it is to bolster the regular budgets of Maryland's arts organizations and arts programs in recognition of the continuing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on the arts sector. We also want this fund to be able to provide flexible funding and allow organizations to set their own spending priorities. Again, the ARGOS funds supplement but do not replace or substitute for regular funding. So all of the regular opportunities that you connect with via MSAC are still there along with their regular cycles. This ARGOS funding, and in fact all of the arts relief funding, is going to be offered in FY 2023 only. Also, you're not required to seek this funding. We assume that most people will want to do so, but it's not in any way a program requirement. So how is funding determined? It's basically based on the grant determination process for the regular MSAC programs that offer general operating support. In this case, we determine your grant amounts in the same way that we determine for ARGOS, in the same way that we determine your grant amounts for the Folklife Network. So you will all be notified of your organization's minimum grant amounts in advance of making an application. I'll get to that in just a few slides. And if for whatever reason your organization, or I should say your regional Folklife Center, wishes to seek grant amounts that are less than the stated minimum, you're encouraged to get in touch with us, and we can see what's possible together. So a little bit more on how funding is determined. Basically, MSAC gives out operating support that leaves the Arts Council either as a block grant or a grant that's based on a formula of some kind. Along with the Arts and Entertainment District operating support and Creativity General operating support, the Folklife Network gets a block grant, as you all know. Our formula-based grants go through the County Arts Development and Grants for Organizations programs. So here's the breakdown that is specific to you all. All of you have, at this stage, already received your fiscal year 23 regular grant through the Folklife Network. The total allocation for that program at MSAC was $680,000, which breaks down to $85,000 per center to be spent on traditional arts expenses of any kind. In round 1 of the ARGOS program this year, the allocation for the Folklife Network is $500,000, which, assuming that all 8 of the Folklife centers both apply for and are successful in getting this funding, would break down to $62,500 per center. Our very approximate estimate for round 2 would be $250,000 total allocation, with just over $30,000 per center. But don't hang your hat on that by any means, because budgets are in flux. Again, let's just focus on round 1 for today, and we'll get to round 2 when the time comes in spring. Just a note about funding encumbrance. The amounts for the ARGOS program were approved by our council, our 17-person board, per program. In other words, that amount's not going to change, that $500,000 total allocation, and the minimum grant amount of $62,500 is, as I say, available to the Folklife Network, provided that everybody's application is successful, but it also could increase. How would it increase? It would increase if only 7 out of the 8 Folklife centers chose to apply, or 6 out of 8, or 5 out of 8. Or if some Folklife centers chose to apply for less than the $62,500 total. But that $500,000, that's the number that we're working with, and we're planning to give all of that out to the Folklife Network in some way, shape, or form. So there is your timeline for application. Applications were slated to be open today, but we had a technical glitch that we ran into early this morning, and we're working to get that resolved. We don't expect that glitch to cause a major delay, and so we will be holding to our submission deadline of October 31st, while taking the rest of the calendar year to do grant processing in round 1 of ARGOS. Round 2 of ARGOS, details will be announced next spring. Who is eligible for ARGOS? Well, you must be a fiscal year 23 grantee of one or more of the following MSAC programs. You all are listed second to last there in the Folklife Network. And a fiscal 23 year grantee, again, means that you've already received your funding. You made your application last year, and probably the check has arrived at this stage for your normal $85,000 grant. If you are a grantee of more than one of the programs listed below, you are invited to submit multiple applications for ARGOS funds, but they do need to be separate. So as far as the Folklife Network goes, you'll submit that application over here. If you also get funding through the Grants for Organizations program, you'll submit a separate application over there. If you're not a grantee of more than one of these programs, it's okay. It's just that some of you happen to be, and we wanted to make very clear what the opportunity is. The support period is as follows. So once again, the ARGOS funds are only being offered this fiscal year. As far as we know, this is the only fiscal year we're going to have this arts relief funding. However, the funds that we're giving out are intended to support expenditures made in multiple fiscal years. So if you are successful in round 1, those funds are intended to support expenditures occurring this fiscal year, in other words, before June 30th. Round 2, when we get to it next spring, those grants are reserved to support activities occurring next fiscal year, fiscal 24. And as with all MSAC grants, funds from this program must be used or obligated by the close of the fiscal year in which they were awarded. So what can you spend this money on? It's really based on the allowable expenditures for the Folklife Network program. You may spend it on, or you should think of these funds in terms of both the allowable and the unallowable expenses for the Folklife Network, which you've already received funding for in fiscal 23. Just as a quick reminder, the Folklife Network supports traditional arts programs essentially across the state at larger organizations. So all of the funds need to support the regional Folklife Center aspects of your activities. Understanding that this is intended as pandemic relief funding, we are also making a one-time allowance to allow you to spend ARGOS funding on debt servicing, allocations to cash reserves, and contributions to endowments. Those elements do, however, need to be connected to regional Folklife Center finances. In other words, directly connected to traditional arts expenditures of some kind. Applications will be reviewed by staff from the relevant programs. So in this case, it will be me reviewing your ARGOS applications. And evaluation is based on 3 factors. First of all, is your organization compliant with all of your currently open MSAC grants? In other words, are you missing an interim or a final report? If so, you would not be able to receive these funds yet. We evaluate based on approval of FY 2023 funding in the relevant program. As far as I know, all of the Folklife Network grants have gone out successfully for fiscal year 23, but without approval, that would lead to ineligibility here. And finally, just ensuring that the uses of funds listing in your ARGOS applications are eligible. And in keeping with the regular expenditures for the Folklife Network, or with the debt servicing, etc. piece that I mentioned a moment ago. Other requirements for the ARGOS program: application via Smart Simple. I'm sure that's not a surprise. Submission of a completed W-9 is required. Also not surprising. You do need to have your unique entity identifier, or UEI number, in place before your ARGOS application will be processed. That's the new federal identifier requirement that is sort of replacing the DUNS number. So if you don't have that yet, do prioritize it before making an ARGOS application. And finally, there will be a final report due at the end of the funding period for any ARGOS funds. If you want more information on this program, you can look at the ARGOS program page on our website. You could look at the larger, broader Arts Relief overview page on our site, or get in touch with your relevant staff member. That's probably going to be me in most cases for this crowd. So, once we have our application up and running, you will log into Smart Simple and you will be taken to Grantee Home, which looks like this. Your next step would be to go down to the Funding Opportunities item and click on that. And from the resulting list, you would choose Arts Relief Funding General Operating Support. That will open an ARGOS application for you. And you will see this list of eligibility check questions. Which program did you receive your FY23 funding for already? Folklife Network. Does your organization have ongoing programs to produce or present the arts to the public? Yes, you do. I'll attest to that. Is your organization incorporated in Maryland or have a significant physical presence here? Yes. Have you operated for 1 full fiscal year? Yes. Again, these are more like eligibility check questions. The only narrative question is here. We're asking you to briefly describe your organization's current financial picture and include how your arts relief funds will supplement your regular operations, capacity building, or other sustainability efforts. Finally, you'll add a couple of attachments: your letter of determination, either as a 501c3 or articles of incorporation for those colleges and universities on the call, and a completed W-9. I'm being told by my contact in the field that the ARGOS application is actually now available in Smart Simple. So if you wanted to make this application tonight, you could absolutely do so. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Kathy, who I think is on the call, our new grants director, for getting this done today. So that's exciting. Our technical glitch has been resolved. You've been sort of eerily silent so far, so here is your explicit invitation to come off of mute and ask questions. Go ahead, Liz. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chad. Can this funding be used to fulfill any match requirements from any other grants we have right now?
I suppose it could, as long as these funds are being used to support your traditional arts efforts, your regional folklife center efforts.
So
So
if,
you've got the oral history project, you've got a
yeah,
number of our archival activities happening. Sure, you could. I think you could probably report that as matching income for another grant.
okay, that's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I'll ask another one since nobody
Go
else has
on.
asked anything yet. So if we can do that, and we look at our grant that we have, and you're saying this is the minimum is 62.5, do you encourage us to ask for more if we have the need for more and let you scale that back, or should we have a conversation with you if we're going to do that?
It's actually not a request-based grant. You would simply put in the application, and based on the number of successful applications that we receive from the Folklife Network, we will divvy out that $500,000 allocation to
Okay.
everyone who is eligible.
Okay.
And I think it's probably also, if it's not clear from the presentation so far, we're really mostly judging on eligibility. It's not really about excellence or community service. We have all that stuff from your existing Folklife Network applications in fiscal 23. We know what you're doing. We know your quality. And this is about further support based on pandemic recovery.
Great. And is this reimbursement same as all other grants, or is this funding up front?
Funding up front.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know my presentation skills aren't that good. Rachel, I see you came off mute. Do you have one for us?
Well, I'm trying to, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm trying to think about how this operating support fits into the realm of a public university budget,
Mhm.
where the programming is still part of our public university. How do you see that as coming into play?
I would think of ARGOS funding less. I mean, I know that universities are sprawling entities, and people in OSP offices are highly expert in navigating some of that administrative field. But if possible, I would think about ARGOS funds less in terms of the university and more in terms of the Folklife Network. So as long as you are spending this funding in alignment with Folklife Network guidelines or on the debt servicing allocation, reserve allocation piece, then that is fine. And
I'm
if
not
you
sure
are
what
in,
debt servicing and reserve allocation would mean in terms of our programming.
it would
I,
presume that there is a way to save money specific to the UMBC Folklife Center. If that does not exist, then you'd have to find probably other ways to either reserve or spend the money, because you couldn't put it toward general UMBC debt, because the
right.
Folklife Network guidelines only allows for 10% maximum of indirect costs.
Okay.
So what does that mean? You could get creative and start a regranting program. You could simply raise the payments that you're currently making to artists, knowing that inflation has been a big issue for us in recent months. You could hire traditional arts staff to work on a shorter term basis and assist with additional programming. And, once you start getting into those weeds, that's where I am happy to have a team meeting with your regional Folklife Center and think about creative ways to spend this money.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I see a couple of more folks who have come off of mute. Any thoughts to share?
I guess my question would be, our fiscal year ends in December of this year. And so basically all the funds would have to be applied to the actual calendar year of 2023 for us, correct?
No, actually, you would not need to observe. You'd only need to observe MSAC's fiscal year in this case. So your books will look different. You might only spend half of the ARGOS amount before December, but as far as we're concerned, you have until June 30th. And that is to spend or to obligate is the official word. That simply means that in your final report, you would be able to show us that any unspent funds have been budgeted for something else in the coming year.
Thank you.
Sure. Great to meet you, by the way, Gregory. I know we've corresponded a couple of times via email. I hope Southeast Baltimore is treating you well so far.
So far, so good. Thank
Great.
you.
Chad, one more question for me. Are we able to use any of this for capital expenditures that are directly related to our Folklife Center?
Unfortunately, no. Our prohibition on capital funding is still in place. However, as some of you probably know, there is legislation that was passed allowing the Arts Council to begin funding capital expenses in fiscal 24. So we are expecting that funding to come through next year and are currently in the process of investigating how that work will be distributed among new or existing staff. Thanks from Doug in the chat. Great news. Certainly help our efforts in Montgomery County. Glad to hear it, Doug. Happy to help. Well, hearing nothing further, I'll move toward our closing. We like to leave a little time to reflect on, not on the content of the session, but on the type of session. Do you feel that this was successful in giving you information about the ARGOS program? Would you rather have had it via email, other formats? Just any notes that you might have on the way we're disseminating this info. Liz says this is perfect. You're very welcome, Liz. Perfect. Wow, what a review. Gregory agrees with Liz. Great. Good and informative, says Doug. All right. Well, if you think on it further and you want to share anything else about the format here, please email us at our general address or reach out to us directly. Okay, so Lynn says an additional email following up with details would be great. I'll do that. And as a matter of fact, this recording will be going on YouTube. So once that is live in the next couple of days, I will reach out to you with a YouTube link, as well as sort of restating some of the details of the ARGOS program. And all that remains is to say thank you. Thank you for supporting the traditional arts in Maryland. We are such an important place for traditional arts nationally because of the work that you do. Thank you for for weathering the storm of the pandemic and continuing to do so. We really appreciate you. Reach out at any time. Again, if you haven't signed up for a newsletter yet, there's the link. And I think that's it for now. So good to see you all. Go in peace.